everyone, today we're going to be talking about breastfeeding. It's breastfeeding week, August, I think 1st through the 7th, something like that. And so we're coming in at the tail end of it, but I hope that you guys still enjoy this video. And if you don't want to hear about mine and Bonnie's and our family's breastfeeding journey, I hope that you can go check out another video. We have lots of vlogs to check out, but this is another motherhood video that I wanted to add to go along with our birth story. So if you haven't seen our birth story, this kind of takes over right where our birth story left off. Our birth went really well. We didn't really have any problems, pushed her out all naturally and all those things. So it was kind of like we did everything we thought we needed to in order to give her the best chance at breastfeeding. So I had a natural birth. She went right up to my chest to chest. She stayed with me for the first hour or even a little bit longer. She had her first attempt at breastfeeding before anybody took her. And so we thought we were off to a great start, and that was not the case. The nurses that were around had kind of said, yeah, that looks about right. I mean, they weren't really digging in there to see, but they were like, yeah, it seems like it's going okay. Feeling pretty good about this. And then the next day, a lactation consultant comes to check on us, and she is kind of checking it out, and she gives us some tips and some things that we can do to have looks like a better latch. But she's like, I don't know, I'm not sure if Bonnie's really getting much from breastfeeding right now. So she suggests that we start hand expressing onto a spoon and then giving that spoon to Bonnie. And so we started doing that as well. She would breastfeed on both boobs for at least 10 minutes on both, and then I would hand express anything and give it to her on a spoon. So we were doing that while we were in the hospital. But in the meantime, Bonnie is losing quite a bit of weight. She's lost from when she was born, probably at this point about 9% of her body weight. And once you get to 10%, that's when you need to start looking at what you're doing and what's happening and what you can change in order to help baby grow and be the healthiest baby that it can be. And so she's losing quite a bit of weight, but we were like, okay, we're going home from the hospital today. We have a lactation consultant appointment set up for the next day. So we said, all right, we'll try for another day. And then, so we got to lactation consultant the next day. That night we ended up, Bonnie was okay. She seemed kind of fussy. She gave hunger cues a lot. Like as soon as she was done breastfeeding, she was giving hunger cues still. Like it didn't seem like she was really getting much out of my breasts. And so we weren't really sure what to do besides to just keep putting her on the breast and keep trying. And then that next day we went to the lactation consultant, and they weighed her, and she was at about 10% body weight loss. And so we were just trying to figure out what to do. So we kind of decided that if she lost any more weight, that we needed to start giving her a bottle with some formula in it. And we had an appointment with our doctor the next day. So we were like, okay, let's just try one more day breastfeeding and we'll see how that goes. And then, so that's what we did. We ended up trying one more day, but it was about halfway through the day, and she just was so upset, and it just seemed like she was really hungry. So I'm feeling horrible. I feel like I'm failing as a mom. Like this is something that my body's supposed to be able to do, is produce milk, and it's not happening. And I must be doing something wrong. I'm not trying hard enough. Bonnie's not latching right, and all these things. And I just am crying a lot, and I feel horrible about it. And I'm like, okay, I finally give in. I say, yeah, let's just give her some formula in a bottle. And so we give it to her. She seems so happy about this. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm eating for probably the first time. And then we didn't really know how to feed her in the bottle. No one had really showed us or taught us yet. And so at this point, she eats her food too fast, and she just like scarfs it down. And Dad went to burp her, and she spit almost all of it probably back up on him. And so that was her first big spit up. And then we ended up giving her first bath out of the hospital that day too, because it was just a mess everywhere. That next morning, right before we had our appointment with our doctor, I had my first letdown. I didn't have clothes on because I just gave birth and I didn't care. So I'm walking out into the living room to grab something for Bonnie, and I felt something drip onto my stomach, and I kind of looked and I was like, that's weird. And I like felt it, and then I felt another one, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm lactating, there's stuff coming out of me. I was so excited, and I was like, oh, it's all gonna be fine now. Like, I started lactating, this was like day 4 after birth. I was like, all right, things are gonna get better, this is gonna go great, like we're good now. So we get to the doctor, and I'm in a much better mood, and I tell her what happened, and she weighs Bonnie, and yes, she has lost about 11% of her body weight, but she said, well, you just started lactating, so she should catch up and she should be just fine. But this was not the case. So we were like, all right, things are gonna get better. Well, we had another lactation consultant's appointment, and at that appointment, Bonnie had still not really gained any weight. We did, I fed her on both. We weighed her before, I fed her, we weighed her again, I fed her on the other boob, we weighed her again, and we were seeing that she was just not getting very much milk. She wasn't really gaining anything when I fed her. And so they showed us how to use basically like a feeding tube that you end up like putting on your nipple while you're breastfeeding, so that they're getting milk this way, but they're still learning how to breastfeed. And so that is what we ended up doing for probably the first 3 months of Bonnie's life. And so they showed us how to do that. They also said I needed to start pumping every time Bonnie ate. And so we ended up, that was the start of our triple feeding. And then sometimes we would also do quadruple feeding. So I'd give Bonnie milk on both breasts, and then I would do the feeding tube to Bonnie. So we would feeding tube on both breasts to Bonnie with milk, and then I would pump, and somebody else would give Bonnie a bottle if it didn't seem like she'd gotten enough milk. So it was quite a process. Sometimes this would take up to an hour trying to do all these things, and this was every 2 or 3 hours that this was happening. And so there was a lot of dishes, there was a lot of time put into this, and all of this was in hopes that I would start producing enough milk to just feed her, and we wouldn't have to keep doing these things. Something else that was really hard about this was that I couldn't do this whole process by myself, so it was usually Joe would be there to help me do the feeding tube. He was really good at getting it. She would get on my boob, and then he was really good at just wiggling it into her mouth, and then she would start getting milk or formula. And but I had a really hard time doing that by myself, and trying to hold everything and hold her, and being a new mom, just not knowing how to hold things. And so Joe had to be up with us every time we fed. So all throughout the night he'd have to be up with us. So no one was really getting very much rest. Thankfully, my mom was with us for the first month of Bonnie's life, and she took over a lot of time with Bonnie so that me and Joe could rest and sleep, and we were very thankful for that. I don't know, I can't imagine trying to do all of this without Joe or my mom. I mean, they were just amazing. 2 months in to this whole breastfeeding journey process, I started to just wonder if anything was ever going to change. I mean, we were doing these things so that I would start producing more milk, but it didn't really seem like I was producing any more milk. It didn't seem like any progress is being made. And so I started to research why I wasn't producing milk, or why my body was doing it the way it was. So I ended up running into something called insufficient glandular tissue, and for short it's called IGT. And a lot of the research talks about different ways you can kind of have a glimpse into if that might be what you have. And so some of the things are that you have a really hard time producing milk. It doesn't seem like when you do produce milk, it doesn't seem like it's coming out of very many places. You can have kind of triangular boobs. They're not very rounded, they're very triangular. One might be a lot bigger than the other, and some other things that go along with that as well. But those are kind of the things that I really stuck out to. I was like, oh, that really sounds like what is happening with me. So then I ended up actually finding a Facebook group, just a national, it might be international, I'm not really sure, Facebook group, and I joined it. You have to answer some questions about what you're doing and what's happening with you, and they kind of, they don't want people just to join that just have low milk supply. I mean, this is for women who are very much struggling, and just this is for women who have IGT. And it was quite an eye-opener because all of the women I had talked to, I mean, a lot of them said, oh yeah, I struggled with this too, I didn't produce enough, and then I took some supplements and then pumped a little bit, and then it all happened. I mean, you'll get it. And so I got a lot of those things, which was nice, and it was, I mean, everybody was trying to give me kind words of encouragement, but that wasn't what was happening for me. So finding this Facebook group really helped me to see that, okay, other women are suffering, other women are doing this on the daily just like I am. We're all trying to make it through, we're all trying to do the best for our kids that we know how. And so that really helped a lot, finding this group and finding some support, which I just didn't really know who to ask at the time. And they also led to just helping me decide what I wanted to do in the long run. So triple feeding, quadruple feeding was just, it was too much. It wasn't working for me. I was getting really depressed and upset, and I felt like I wasn't actually like really spending time with Bonnie, because as soon as she ate and she would usually fall asleep, somebody else would take her so I could pump, and it just felt like I wasn't really getting a lot of bonding time where I could just hold her and love on her, and so that was really hard for me. So we had to kind of decide what was going to be most important for us. Was it that Bonnie was breastfeeding and being with me a lot and having that connection, or was it that she was getting the most breast milk that she could get? And so we kind of tried both, really, because I just didn't know what to do. So we ended up going through a lot of different ways of feeding her. We kind of morphed as we went. So one of them was that we would just give her a bottle and I would pump, and she would get like 1 bottle of breast milk a day from what I could pump. All the rest would be formula. And then another thing we did was I would give her breast milk, and then we would feed her with a bottle, and then I would pump. Or, I mean, there was just a lot of different configurations we tried, and then pumping was just really hard. All of you mamas who pump all the time, I'm in awe, because it's so much time and so many dishes, and just, it's a lot, and you're not getting to spend that time with your baby usually. And I'm just, you guys are amazing. Keep it up, because whew, you're doing great. So it was about 3 months in where we decided, me and Joe kind of just sat down and talked through it, and we decided that I was just gonna breastfeed Bonnie as much as she wanted to breastfeed, and we would give her milk, you know, every 2 or 3 hours when it seemed like she was hungry. And that's kind of what we went with in the long run, because that's what worked best for us. So she started off getting, you know, some milk, and we could, you know, I had to wear breast pads and things like that. And then eventually, probably at about 5 months, 6 months, we started just kind of breastfeeding her as she went down for a nap. So she would have mamas to fall asleep. That's what we called it. We called it mamas. She would have her mamas to fall asleep, and then she would also have her milk throughout the day. But usually mamas was what actually got her to fall asleep, because that was one of the problems from the very beginning, was that every time she got on breast milk, she would just fall asleep, and it was really hard. We would be trying to wake her up, we'd be poking her and tickling her and messing with her, but she got too relaxed and she just wanted to sleep. So she ended up having mamas until she was about 13 months old. It was around the 4th of July where I think it was the last time she had it. She kind of weaned herself off, which I was hoping for in the beginning. I was like, I hope that she kind of figures this out and just does it herself. So she hasn't had mamas for probably a month or so, and she's doing good. She's, you know, living her best life. Something else that happened that kind of led to this experience as well was that Bonnie actually had a lip and tongue tie, and at about a week old, we saw a dentist who had the laser technology in order to reverse that. So they used a laser to cut her lip and tongue tie, and this was really the first like really hard decision we had to make for Bonnie, just saying like what is best for her, what is best for us. And it was hard. That is something that you aren't prepared for, is to make these life-changing decisions for another human being. It's a lot of responsibility, you know, being a parent. I hadn't thought about that yet at that point. And so we decided to get the revisions done, and we were hoping that this would really help Bonnie to be able to latch and suck and things like that. But to our dismay, it will probably have helped her in the long run, but it didn't really help her with breastfeeding, because at that point we didn't know that I had insufficient glandular tissue, and so we just were trying to figure out what was going on, and that was one of the things that could have led to her and I not meshing, because neither of us could breastfeed very well. So all in all, this was a long, hard, grueling process, going through all of these things that I wasn't prepared for. A lot of women had talked about how it's really hard, it's painful, you get cracked nipples, you can blister, you might get mastitis and things like that. But nobody had talked to me about the fact that there are women who just do not produce enough milk to feed their baby. And I just wasn't prepared for me to be one of those women that couldn't produce enough milk to feed their baby. It hadn't gotten to my mind that that could be a problem. I thought that if you worked hard enough, if you pumped and you took the medicines and you took the teas and you ate the cookies, you know, if you do all those things, you should be able to get it. But I'm sure that there are other mamas watching this who understand that that is not the case, and I am not alone in the fact that you did all these things, you worked as hard as you could, and you just cannot produce enough breast milk to exclusively breastfeed your baby. So I feel you, mamas. There was, wow. We'll see what happens with the next kid. I'm guessing it'll be pretty much the same experience, except for I'll have some more knowledge behind me. I'll be less intimidated, things like that. So if I had to number some of the things that we learned through this process, it was, number one would probably be that no matter how hard you work, not everyone can exclusively breastfeed. Number two was that not being able to breastfeed your baby, or not being able to exclusively breastfeed your baby, does not make you a bad mom. You are doing the best for you and your baby, and sometimes it's not what you planned. And number three would be that sometimes finding what works best for you and your baby is gonna take some time. You're not gonna figure it out right away, and it might change throughout your baby's life. You know, what worked really well in the beginning might need to change as you go back to work, or as you find that you're getting just mentally exhausted trying to figure all these things out, or getting anxiety. Sometimes your plans have to change, and that's okay. You just have to keep doing what's best for you and your baby. So all in all, I believe that feeding your baby is what is best for your baby. So if you use a feeding tube, if you breastfeed, if you give your baby a bottle with pumped milk, or if you gave your baby a bottle with formula, you know, any way you feed your baby is a great way to feed your baby. It's important that they are fed, and in the end, that's what's most important for me. That's what I believe would be most important. All right, thanks for watching. I hope that I connected with some of you mamas who might be struggling and just don't understand what's happening to you. That was me at one point, so I'm glad that you found this video. If you're a family member, you know, sometimes you just gotta give your love to these mamas who are trying to figure this out, and maybe they don't always need your advice, but just some support in whatever way that means to you. So hopefully you feel like you're less alone in this, and thank you for watching and learning about our breastfeeding journey. I hope you have a great day.